Picture this. One of Europe's mightiest kings, ruler of an empire stretching oceans away, was so twisted in body and mind his own people whispered he was demon-cursed. That king was Charles II of Spain. To them, he wasn't just royalty, he was a walking omen of doom. They named him El Hechizado, the bewitched king. His face was warped by a massive jutting jaw. His words came out thick and slurred. His body was so wrecked it baffled everyone. He couldn't walk right, speak clearly, or even feed himself. Worst of all, he could not have a child. But demons weren't to blame, neither was witchcraft or heaven's anger. The real culprit was his family tree. Charles was the end result of centuries of the Habsburg dynasty marrying their own relatives, obsessed with keeping power pure. Cousins married cousins, uncles married nieces, generation after generation. They thought they were protecting royal blood. Instead, they were shredding their own genes. This is the grim true tale of a king whose body was ruined by faulty DNA. A man so sick inside that doctors gasped at his autopsy. A monarch whose death didn't just finish his family line, it sparked a war that set Europe ablaze. Forget grand stories of royal glory. This isn't about crowns and victories. It's a slow crumbling disaster written in bent bones and wasting flesh. This is the tragedy of Charles II, the king wrecked by his own blood. Imagine foreign ambassadors arriving at the Spanish court, ready to meet the ruler of vast lands. What they saw shocked them speechless. Charles II, King of Spain, master of territories circling the globe, couldn't even shut his mouth. His jaw stuck out so horribly his lips couldn't touch. His mouth hung open like a broken gate. This wasn't a simple birth defect. It was the cost of 200 years of the Habsburgs marrying far, far too close. See, the Habsburgs believed pure blood meant power. In reality, their weddings were family reunions. Cousins wed cousins, uncles wed nieces. Their family tree didn't spread out, it coiled inward like a snake biting its tail. Charles's parents, uncle and niece, his grandparents, also uncle and niece on both sides. By Charles's birth, his gene pool was tiny like a dirty puddle. Genetically, he had less variety than someone from a tribe cut off for ages, and it showed. His most famous feature? Doctors call it mandibular prognathism. Everyone else called it the Habsburg jaw. Charles's lower jaw didn't just stick out, it ruled his face. His top and bottom teeth never met. You could fit a coin sideways when his mouth was shut. Chewing was impossible. Talking was a battle. Eating wasn't royal ritual for Charles. It was shameful. Every meal was mashed to mush like baby food. Meat was ground to paste. Bread was soaked to slop. Even then it often failed. Servants had to wipe drool from his chin. Soup dribbled constantly. Bits of food fell out like crumbs. Dinners meant to show royal splendour became grim shows. Courtiers trying not to flinch as their king slurped and drooled. His speech? Nearly gibberish. His jaw didn't just ruin eating, it mangled words. Speech came out wet, garbled, like talking with a mouthful of stones. Foreign diplomats needed translators not for Spanish, but for Charles's Spanish. Even his mother, Queen Mariana, secretly feared he'd choke in his sleep, worried his huge tongue and twisted throat would betray him. Imagine, the King of Spain, ruler of the New World, a nightly choking risk. The saddest part? The Habsburgs saw this coming. They watched deformities worsen each generation, but power mattered more than health, more than their own children. Charles wasn't an accident. He was a warning they ignored, and the jaw was only the start. Charles II's whole body was a lesson in genetic disaster. At 35, he looked like a sick child stretched and melted. He stood barely 5 feet tall, but it was his shape that horrified. His head was huge, wobbling on a neck too thin to hold it. His limbs were sticks, thin and bony. His chest looked crushed, like he was squeezed into a human mould that didn't fit. He didn't walk until he was 8. Most kids stumble walking by age 2. Charles crawled for nearly a decade, too weak to stand. Even then, he didn't walk. He shuffled, stumbling from chair to table like a frail old man, not a young king. His spine was badly curved, hunched over as if carrying a heavy load. And in a way, he was. The crushing weight of centuries of bad genetic luck. His mind? Just as damaged. Charles had a child's understanding well into adulthood. He didn't read until 10, and even then it didn't stick. His tutors said teaching him was like pouring water into a cracked jug. It just ran out. His emotions were wild. He threw tantrums over tiny things, screaming and crying. Then came silent spells, hours staring blankly, lost. Even his hair told the story, thin, patchy, falling out. His scalp was red and sore. Court painters were told to make him handsome using shadows and tricks, but no artist could hide the truth. The scariest part. Charles wasn't born with all these problems. He got worse as he aged. Most people stabilise young. Charles fell apart. His body broke down faster than doctors could grasp. It was like nature was taking him back. Medicine had no answers, so the court looked elsewhere. That's when things turned truly dark. Charles II wasn't just a sad king, he was a royal time bomb. Because a king's biggest job? Have an heir. Charles couldn't. Though Europe's most powerful man on paper, his body failed the most basic kingly task. He married twice. Both times ended the same. Heartbreak, scandal, no child. His first wife, Marie-Louise of Orléans, was a lively French princess. She expected power, prestige, a normal husband. Arriving in Madrid, she found a man looking like a sick child in king's robes. Their wedding night was a disaster. Witnesses said Marie-Louise came out crying. Charles looked confused, maybe unaware of what to do. Doctors found the awful truth. Charles's private parts were tiny like a baby's. Today we'd say he was stuck in a child's body sexually. The Spanish court couldn't admit this, not publicly. The official lie? Marie-Louise were barren. So began years of blame and shame. She suffered endless, painful exams, gross tonics, bloodletting, magic fertility rites. Some potions made her vomit and hallucinate. But no baby came, because the problem wasn't her, it was Charles. The strain broke Marie-Louise. Once witty and bright, she became quiet, sad, lost in prayer for a miracle that never came. She died suddenly at 26. Rumours flew, illness, heartbreak, poisoned by the court or their awful cures. Whatever the cause, the Habsburgs still had no heir. So Charles married again. His second wife, Maria Anna of Neuburg, came from a famously fertile German family. 11 siblings. Surely she could succeed, but Charles was worse. Maria Anna's letters show her horror at his looks and her grim understanding. This marriage too would fail. Still, the court tried everything. Doctors from across Europe, ancient books, magic cures, some like torture. Charles was poked, prodded, forced into humiliating rituals with holy oils and strange plants. Nothing worked, because the problem wasn't magic or medicine, it was his broken body. Europe watched. Everyone knew no heir meant the Spanish throne was up for grabs. France, Austria, England all had claims, ready to fight. Secret deals were made, armies prepared. Diplomats called it succession planning. Really? Vultures circling a dying empire. The cruel irony? The Habsburgs spent centuries arranging marriages to keep power in the family, and that obsession destroyed them. Their final king, the peak of their breeding plan, couldn't even conceive. They had literally bred themselves out of existence. When science failed, the Spanish court turned to the church. Not just for prayers, for exorcism. Yes, really. By the end, priests replaced doctors. The throne room became a stage for casting out demons. Why? Many believed only one thing explained Charles: possession. Father Froilan Diaz, the chief exorcist, claimed Charles held dozens of demons. Cursed by witches before birth, his twisted body and mind all Satan's work. So began the rituals, publicly, in the palace before nobles and foreign guests. Picture it, the King of Spain thrashing on cold stone as robed priests circled, chanting Latin, splashing holy water. Incense thick in the air. Crosses pressed to his chest until he screamed. Ground up holy relics mixed in his water. He'd drink it, then vomit violently. Priests called this proof demons were fighting. Charles would shake, sweat pouring. Sometimes he collapsed for hours. Each time the priest claimed a demon was gone. By 1699, Father Diaz said they'd cast out 4 demons, one for each symptom: seizures, impotence, confusion, and more. It wasn't just Charles. The whole palace was seen as cursed. In one bizarre royal moment, exorcists ordered a spiritual cleaning. Servants gathered cursed objects, old gifts, furniture, queen's belongings. They built huge bonfires in courtyards. Priests chanted over the flames as everything burned. Charles, he believed it worked. With his simple mind and desperate hope, Exorcisms gave him something medicine couldn't. Belief he might heal, but the cost was high. The rituals exhausted him, leaving him bedridden. His fragile body was pushed to its limit. Every new symptom brought pleas for another exorcism. The Spanish court wasn't a government anymore. It was a desperate madhouse ruled by old superstitions. Charles wasn't ruling, he was just clinging to life. But even that was ending. The final act was near. What happened after his death would stun all of Europe. On November 1st, 1700, the bewitched king died. Charles II of Spain, last of his line, was 38. No heir, no legacy, just rumours and a shattered empire. But death held one last secret. Years blaming demons and witches, now royal doctors wanted the truth. They performed an autopsy, hoping to silence rumours. Instead, they found horror. The report by Dr. from Geronimo de Frias y Parola was so appalling it was hidden. But secrets leak. The details were nightmarish. Start with his heart. Shriveled, black, walnut-sized. A healthy heart weighs about 300 grams. Charles's was a tiny fraction. It looked like burnt meat, dry, brittle, dead long before him. How did it pump blood? Doctors had no clue. His lungs? Rotten, gangrene-filled, decaying inside. The stench was so vile assistants ran. Court letters called the smell suffocatingly foul beyond anything known. Worse was coming. His guts were putrid, like rotting for months or years. His stomach held fluid, bile, undigested food, proof his digestion was failing. Then the parts that caused such political chaos, his private organs, catastrophically tiny like a child's. The medical words hinted, but the truth screamed. Charles was never able to father a child. He never had a chance. The final discovery chilled them most. Opening Charles's skull, doctors found it filled with abnormal fluid. Today we call it hydrocephalus, fluid crushing the brain. In 1700 it seemed like horror. His brain tissue was discoloured, soft, partly decayed. The doctor noted parts seemed diseased from birth, likely causing his simple mind, seizures and wild moods. Dr. Parola ended with a line that echoed through European courts. It is a miracle this body lived so long, holding not one single sound organ, not one. The findings fed myths, didn't end them. How could a man so deformed, so rotten inside, even live that long? To believers, it proved something supernatural touched him. If not demons, then God's wrath. But there was no magic, only biology. Charles's death left the Spanish Empire adrift, no heir, only a split kingdom and a disputed will. Europe's great powers, ready for this, pounced. What followed was one of the 1700s' bloodiest wars, the War of the Spanish Succession. It lasted 13 years, dragged in nearly every European nation, killed hundreds of thousands. Cities burned, borders changed, alliances broke, all because one man, broken from birth, failed his one key duty. It wasn't just a land war, it was the violent final gasp of a dynasty that ruled for ages. A dynasty believing pure blood meant a divine right, that marrying cousins kept power strong. Instead, it made Charles II Europe's mightiest family had literally bred itself to death. Today, Charles II is often a footnote, a strange, pitiful king who failed. But look deeper. He wasn't just a bad king, he was biology's warning, a symbol of human ambition smashing human limits, of power lust so fierce a family sacrificed its own future, of royal blood becoming a curse. Charles's story isn't just about deformity, it's about denial. The Habsburgs saw the warnings, each generation sicker, weaker, more twisted. But instead of stopping, they pushed harder. Admitting weakness risked their empire, so they lied, covered it up, called it witchcraft, blamed wives, hired priests. But biology doesn't care about politics. It doesn't care about thrones, titles, or divine rights. It just breaks, quietly, fatally. And when it did, it took a dynasty and half of Europe down with it. So next time someone dreams of royal blood or power by birth, remember Charles II, the king with no heir, no healthy organ, no chance from the start. A king who died not by assassin's blade, betrayal or battle, but by being exactly what his family made him.